3 in the morning, and I'm standing in my own kitchen like a stranger. The house feels different now, every corner tainted with the knowledge that my wife, Alma, has been planning her exit strategy for months. The marble countertops she insisted we install last year reflect the streetlight streaming through our bay window, casting shadows that seem to mock everything I thought I knew about my life. My name is Zane Merrinor, and I'm a construction project manager. 38 years old, built like someone who's spent more time swinging hammers than sitting behind desks. I've got calloused hands and a practical mind that served me well in a business where one miscalculation can cost millions. But all that experience counting materials and managing timelines didn't prepare me for discovering that my wife had been calculating the best way to replace me. Alma Jorvens Merrinor, she kept her family name hyphenated, should have seen that red flag, sleeps upstairs in our bed, probably dreaming about her bright future with Colby Varron, the golden boy, the upgrade, the man her family thinks she should have married in the first place. I found the evidence tonight, purely by accident. Alma's gym bag was sitting by the back door, and her regular phone fell out when I moved it. But there was something else. A second phone, a cheap burner that didn't match anything in our house. The screen lit up when it hit the floor, showing a text message that made my stomach drop. Can't wait until we don't have to hide anymore. Your family's right. You deserve so much better than him. The message was from Colby, time-stamped just 2 hours ago. 2 hours ago, while I was watching television downstairs, thinking my wife was taking a bath. I scrolled through the messages with the methodical patience I use when reviewing construction blueprints. Every detail mattered. Every timestamp told a story. The conversation history painted a picture of a woman who'd been planning her exit for months, coordinating with a man who'd been circling our marriage like a vulture. The worst part wasn't the betrayal itself, it was the calculated nature of it. Alma hadn't fallen into this affair. She'd engineered it. The messages showed planning sessions, discussions about timing, even conversations about how to handle the family announcement. Her parents, Elias and Lorraine Jorvens, had apparently been offering advice on the transition. Mother thinks we should wait until after the foundation gala, one message read. Better optics for the family. Optics. My marriage was ending because of optics. I set the phone back exactly where I found it and walked to my workshop in the basement. This room was mine, the only space in the house that Alma never tried to redecorate or improve. My tools hung in perfect order on pegboard walls. My workbench held projects in various stages of completion. Everything had a place and everything made sense, unlike my marriage, apparently. I sat on my work stool and tried to process what I'd learned. Alma wanted out, her family approved of the replacement, and they were all just waiting for the right moment to make it official. The foundation gala was next month, some charity event where the Jorvens family would make their annual appearance as pillars of the community. Perfect timing for a public transition. The smart thing would be to confront Alma immediately, demand explanations, fight for my marriage, maybe even try to win back her family's approval. That's what the old Zane would have done. The Zane who'd spent 15 years trying to measure up to the Jorvens family's expectations. But sitting in my workshop, surrounded by tools that had never let me down, I felt something different settling in my chest. Not anger, exactly. Something colder, more calculating. If Alma wanted to treat our marriage like a construction project, something to be planned, managed, and eventually demolished, then maybe it was time to show her how good I was at managing projects. I opened my laptop and started making lists. Assets, accounts, shared responsibilities, legal obligations. I approached it like any other job site analysis, breaking down the complex situation into manageable components. By dawn, I had a plan. The next morning arrived with the kind of gray drizzle that makes Portside, Maine look like a postcard from a depressed tourist. I was already dressed and drinking coffee when Alma wandered into the kitchen, wearing her silk robe and the expression of someone who'd slept perfectly well with her secrets. "You're up early," she said, not quite meeting my eyes. "Couldn't sleep," I replied, which was true enough. "Big project starting this week." Alma poured herself coffee and checked her phone, her regular phone. "I've got that client dinner tonight. Probably won't be home until late." "Client dinner. Right. No problem," I said. "I'll probably work late anyway." She seemed relieved, which told me everything I needed to know about how she really felt about spending time with her husband. After Alma left for her public relations job downtown, I called my crew chief, Rafe Morrison. Rafe and I had worked together for 8 years, and he was the kind of guy who'd help you move a body without asking questions. Not that I needed anything that extreme. "I need a favor," I told him when he answered. "Name it, boss." "I'm moving some things tonight. Personal stuff. Could use an extra pair of hands." "Moving things where?" "Storage unit. Just some tools and equipment I want to keep separate." Rafe was quiet for a moment. He'd met Alma at company parties, had probably picked up on the tension even when I was still pretending everything was fine. "What time?" he asked. "After dark. Say, 9 o'clock?" "I'll be there." That afternoon, I drove to a storage facility on the outskirts of town and rented a unit under my business name. Then I stopped by an electronics store and purchased some items I'd need for the next phase of my plan. Nothing illegal, nothing that would raise eyebrows. Just some basic tracking devices and a few other gadgets that any construction manager might legitimately need for equipment security. The beauty of my job is that I work with technology every day. GPS tracking for expensive tools, security cameras for job sites, communication systems for coordinating crews. I knew exactly what was available, what was legal, and how to use it effectively. By the time Alma left for her client dinner, I was ready. Rafe showed up right on schedule, driving his pickup truck and asking no unnecessary questions. We worked efficiently, moving boxes of my personal tools, important documents, and anything else I wanted to keep secure. Alma would notice eventually, but not tonight. "Boss?" Rafe said as we loaded the last box. "You mind me asking what's going on?" I considered how much to tell him. Rafe was loyal, but he was also a talker when he'd been drinking. "Alma and I are probably getting divorced," I said finally. "I'm just making sure my stuff doesn't get complicated in the legal process." Rafe nodded. "Smart thinking. My ex-wife tried to claim half my tools in our settlement. Judge laughed her out of court, but still." After Rafe left, I spent some time in my workshop, planning the next steps. The tracking devices I'd purchased were small, magnetic, and designed for legitimate purposes like fleet management. Installing one on Alma's car would be simple enough. We shared the garage, and I'd installed her current GPS system anyway. Colby's Tesla would be trickier, but not impossible. I'd seen it parked at various locations around town, always in spots where he could show it off. Vanity would work in my favor. But first, I needed more information about my wife's new boyfriend. I opened my laptop and started researching. Colby Varron, 37 years old, founder of a tech startup called Disrupt Solutions. The company's website was full of buzzwords and vague promises about revolutionizing local business paradigms. Their office was in one of those converted warehouse spaces downtown, the kind of place that tried too hard to look innovative. Colby's social media presence was extensive and carefully curated. Photos of him at networking events, posing with his Tesla, attending charity functions. He looked exactly like what he was, a man who'd built his entire identity around appearing successful. The interesting part was his business history. 3 previous startups, all of which had folded within 2 years. A pattern of big launches, aggressive marketing, and eventual quiet shutdowns. Either Colby was remarkably unlucky, or he wasn't as brilliant as he pretended to be. I made notes, cross-referencing dates and details. If Alma wanted to upgrade to a better man, She might be interested to know that her choice had a track record of failure. My phone buzzed with a text message. Alma, checking in from her dinner. Running late. Don't wait up. I texted back, no problem. Sleep well. Then I grabbed my jacket and headed for the garage. Time to install some insurance. The Drift was exactly the kind of bar that Alma would never set foot in, which made it perfect for my purposes. Located near the docks in the old part of Portside, it catered to fishermen, construction workers, and anyone else who preferred their drinks strong and their conversations honest. Mia Chen worked behind the bar 3 nights a week, and she had a talent for collecting information. Not gossip, exactly, more like social intelligence. She remembered everything she heard, connected dots that other people missed, and had an instinct for reading people that would have made her rich in any other profession. "Zane Merrinor," she said when I walked in. "What brings you to my humble establishment?" "Bourbon," I said, settling onto a bar stool. "And maybe some conversation." Mia poured my drink and leaned against the bar. She was small, sharp-eyed, and had the kind of smile that made people want to tell her things they probably shouldn't. "Conversation about anything in particular?" "You know a guy named Colby Varron?" Her expression shifted slightly. "The tech guy with the fancy car?" "Sure, I know of him. Why?" "Just curious about his reputation around town." Mia studied my face for a moment, then glanced around the bar. It was a slow night, just a few regulars nursing their drinks and watching the game on the television above the bar. "Colby Varron," she said quietly, "is the kind of guy who tips big on the first date and stiffs the waitress on the second. He's been making the rounds lately, showing up at all the right parties, shaking all the right hands." "Successful businessman?" "That depends on how you define success. His company's got a nice office and a lot of buzz, but I've heard some interesting things from people who work in that building." I sipped my bourbon and waited. Mia had a storyteller's sense of timing. "Apparently, they're behind on rent," she continued. "And there's some question about where their funding actually comes from. Plus, he's got a reputation for being, let's say, friendly with his female employees." "How friendly?" "Friendly enough that his assistant quit last month and won't talk about why. Friendly enough that there are rumors about inappropriate workplace relationships." I absorbed this information while Mia served another customer. When she returned, I asked the question I'd really come to ask. "You ever see him around town with anyone in particular?" Mia's smile was knowing. "You mean like a married woman who drives a white BMW and works in public relations?" My poker face must have slipped because Mia's expression softened. "Zane, honey, half the town's seen them together. Lunch dates, coffee meetings, long conversations in parking lots. If you're looking for confirmation, I can give it to you." "What about her family?" "The Jorvens." "Oh, they love him. Elias Jorvens been introducing Colby around like he's already part of the family. They had dinner at the country club last week. Very public, very cozy." I finished my bourbon and left a 20 on the bar. "Thanks for the conversation." "Zane," Mia called as I stood to leave, "whatever you're planning, be smart about it. The Jorvens have money and connections. Colby's got charm and ambition. But you've got something they don't." "What's that?" "You actually know how to build things that last." I drove home through empty streets, thinking about what Mia had told me. The picture was becoming clearer. Alma hadn't just found a replacement husband, she'd found one that came pre-approved by her family. Colby was everything they thought I wasn't: sophisticated, connected, part of their social circle. But he was also potentially broke, definitely unethical, and apparently incapable of keeping a business running for more than 2 years. That gave me leverage. Back home, I checked the tracking device I'd installed on Alma's car. The GPS history showed exactly what I'd expected: lunch meetings, evening visits to Colby's apartment building, stops at locations that had nothing to do with her job. The data was clean, documented, and legally obtained. If this went to divorce court, I'd have everything I needed to prove infidelity. But court was the nuclear option. Before I went that route, I wanted to see how far I could push this situation using nothing but information and patience. I opened my laptop and started building a more detailed profile of Colby's business dealings, public records, business filings, social media connections, the kind of research I'd do before bidding on a major construction project. What I found was fascinating. Disrupt Solutions was indeed behind on their office rent, 3 months, according to the court filings I found online. Their business license had been renewed late, with penalty fees. Most interesting of all, Colby had recently applied for several personal loans, all of which had been denied. The successful entrepreneur was actually broke. I leaned back in my chair and smiled. Alma thought she was upgrading to a better man, but she'd actually chosen someone whose financial situation was worse than mine. Her family approved of Colby because they didn't know the real story, but I did, and that knowledge was about to become very valuable. The Jorvens Foundation Gala was still 3 weeks away, but I wasn't planning to wait that long to make my first move. Alma and her family had been orchestrating this transition for months. It was time to introduce some variables they hadn't planned for. I started with something simple: visibility. As a project manager, I'd always been good at my job, but I'd never been particularly ambitious about self-promotion. I did the work, collected my paycheck, and went home. That approach had served me well, but it hadn't impressed the Jorvens, who measured success by social status rather than actual competence. Time to change that strategy. I called my boss, Tom Richardson, and asked for a meeting. Tom was a good guy who'd been running Richardson Construction for 20 years. He valued reliability over flash, which is why we'd always worked well together. I want to take on more responsibility, I told him in his office. Bigger projects, client relations, maybe some of the business development work. Tom looked surprised. This is coming out of nowhere, Zane. You've always preferred the technical side. People change, I said. I'm ready for new challenges. We talked for an hour about possibilities. Tom had been looking for someone to handle the company's expansion into commercial development, bigger projects, higher profiles, more interaction with city planning and local business leaders. It would mean longer hours, Tom warned. More meetings, more politics, more visibility. That's exactly what I want. By the end of the week, I was officially Richardson Construction's new director of commercial development. The promotion came with a significant raise, a company car, and an invitation to join the Portside Business Association. Suddenly, I was showing up at the same networking events that Colby frequented. The first time I encountered him was at a Chamber of Commerce mixer downtown. He was holding court near the bar, entertaining a small group with stories about his latest business venture. I watched him for a few minutes, studying his mannerisms and listening to his pitch. Colby was smooth. I had to give him that. He had the kind of confidence that came from years of practice at selling himself. But I'd spent enough time around contractors and subcontractors to recognize when someone was overselling. I waited until he was between conversations, then approached with a friendly smile. Colby Varron, right? I'm Zane Merrinor, Richardson Construction. He shook my hand with the firm grip of someone who'd read books about making good first impressions. Good to meet you, Zane. I don't think we've met before. I'm new to the commercial side of things, just got promoted to Director of Development. Congratulations, Colby said, though his smile flickered slightly. What kind of projects are you working on? I mentioned a few of our current developments, a mixed-use complex downtown, a new office park on the north side of town, a renovation of the old Maritime Museum, all real projects, all significant contracts that would be highly visible when completed. Impressive, Colby said. We should talk sometime about potential collaborations. Disrupt Solutions is always looking for innovative partnerships. I'd like that, I lied smoothly. What exactly does Disrupt Solutions disrupt? Colby launched into his standard pitch about revolutionizing local business paradigms and creating synergistic solutions for traditional industries. It was the kind of presentation that sounded impressive if you didn't listen too carefully to the actual content. I nodded at appropriate moments and asked a few technical questions that clearly made him uncomfortable. When he started hedging his answers, I knew I'd found his weakness. Colby was much better at talking about innovation than actually implementing it. "Well," I said finally, "I should let you get back to your other conversations. Nice meeting you, Colby." As I walked away, I could feel him watching me. Good. I wanted him to remember this conversation. Over the next 2 weeks, I made sure to show up at every business event, community meeting, and professional gathering where I might encounter Colby or members of Alma's family. I wasn't aggressive about it, just present, professional, and increasingly visible in circles where I'd never appeared before. The transformation didn't go unnoticed at home. "You're working late a lot lately," Alma observed one evening as I got ready for another networking event. "New responsibilities?" I said, adjusting my tie. "Tom's got me handling the commercial development portfolio now." "That's great," she said, though she didn't sound entirely pleased. "I didn't know you were interested in that side of the business." "There's a lot you don't know about my interests lately." Alma's expression tightened slightly, but she didn't pursue the comment. She was probably relieved that my increased work schedule gave her more freedom for her own evening activities. What she didn't realize was that my evening activities were beginning to overlap with hers. The second time I encountered Colby was at a fundraiser for the Maritime Museum, one of the projects my company was renovating. This time, he seemed less pleased to see me. "Zane," he said with forced enthusiasm, "how's the construction business?" "Booming," I replied. "We just landed the contract for the new waterfront development. $60 million project." This was true. Richardson Construction had been selected as the general contractor for a major mixed-use development that would reshape Portside's downtown area. The announcement had been in the local paper that morning. Colby's smile became more strained. "That's quite a coup. What about you? How's the disruption business?" "Excellent. We're expanding rapidly, bringing on new clients every week." I nodded politely, though I knew from my research that Disrupt Solutions hadn't signed a major new client in 6 months. "That's wonderful. Growth can be challenging to manage, though. Cash flow, overhead expenses, maintaining quality while scaling up." Colby's eye twitched slightly. "We've got excellent financial management." "I'm sure you do. It's just that I've seen a lot of businesses struggle with rapid expansion. Sometimes the fundamentals get overlooked in favor of growth metrics." I was speaking from experience. I'd watched several subcontractors go under because they took on more work than they could handle. But Colby clearly heard it as a veiled criticism of his business model. "Well," he said stiffly, "every industry has its challenges." "Absolutely," I agreed. "The key is building on a solid foundation." I excused myself and moved on to other conversations, leaving Colby to wonder whether I'd been making a general observation or a specific warning. By the time I got home that night, I was feeling satisfied with my progress. I was establishing myself as a significant presence in Portside's business community, demonstrating competence and success in ways that the Jorven family would eventually notice. More importantly, I was making Colby uncomfortable. Alma was already asleep when I got home, but there was a message waiting on my phone, a text from an unknown number. "Heard you've been making quite an impression at the business events lately. Interesting timing." I stared at the message for a long moment, then deleted it without responding. Someone was paying attention to my activities. That was fine. I wanted people to notice. But I wondered who was watching closely enough to have my personal phone number. The answer to my question came 3 days later, when Alma's brother Dax showed up at my office unannounced. Dax Jorven was 32 years old, worked in his father's investment firm, and had the kind of entitled attitude that came from never having to earn anything he'd been given. "We need to talk," he said, settling into the chair across from my desk without being invited. "About what?" "About your sudden interest in networking events and business development." I leaned back in my chair and studied Dax's face. He was trying to project authority, but there was uncertainty in his eyes. Good. That meant my activities were having the intended effect. I got promoted, I said simply. Part of my job now is community engagement. Right, Dax said. And it's just a coincidence that you're showing up at all the same events as Colby Varron? Colby who? Dax's jaw tightened. Don't play games with me, Zane. We both know what's going on here. Do we? Because I'm not sure I understand what you're implying. I'm implying that you need to back off. Alma's made her choice, the family supports her decision, and your little campaign to insert yourself into our social circle isn't going to change anything. I let the silence stretch for a moment, watching Dax squirm. He'd come here expecting to intimidate me, but he was discovering that intimidation required more substance than he possessed. Dax, I said finally, I appreciate you taking time out of your busy schedule to visit, but I'm not sure why my professional activities are any of your business. Because they're making people uncomfortable. Which people? Colby, for one. He's concerned that you're trying to interfere with his business relationships. I almost laughed. Colby's concerned about competition? That's interesting, considering his company's track record. Dax's expression sharpened. What do you mean by that? I mean that anyone can look up public business records, Dax. Disrupt Solutions isn't exactly disrupting anything except their own cash flow. Colby's business is doing fine. Is it? Because the court records suggest they're 3 months behind on rent. Their business license renewal was late, and Colby's been applying for personal loans that keep getting denied. Dax went quiet, which told me that the Jorven family didn't know about Colby's financial problems. They'd been impressed by his presentation without doing any due diligence on his actual situation. That's privileged information, Dax said weakly. It's public record, available to anyone who knows where to look. I opened my laptop and turned the screen toward Dax, showing him the business filings I'd researched. His face went pale as he scanned the documents. This doesn't change anything, he said, but his voice lacked conviction. Doesn't it? Because it seems like your family has been encouraging Alma to leave her financially stable husband for a man who can't pay his office rent. Dax stood up abruptly. Stay away from our family events, Zane, and stay away from Colby's business. Or what? He didn't have an answer for that, so he left without another word. I spent the rest of the afternoon thinking about the conversation. Dax's visit confirmed that my activities were causing concern in the Jorven camp. More importantly, it revealed that they didn't know the full truth about Colby's situation. That evening, I decided to test another pressure point. Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible Reddit stories. I drove to Colby's apartment building, a converted warehouse in the trendy part of downtown. His Tesla was parked in its usual spot, positioned where passers-by would be sure to notice it. I walked past the car twice, noting the security cameras and the pedestrian traffic patterns. Then I went home and made a phone call. Mia, it's Zane. I need another favor. What kind of favor? The kind that involves your bartending skills and your talent for conversation. I explained what I needed. Mia listened without interrupting, then asked a few clarifying questions. This is about your wife and the tech guy, isn't it? It's about getting accurate information. Uh-huh. And what's in it for me? Dinner at the nicest restaurant in town, plus whatever it costs to make this look natural. Mia was quiet for a moment. You know, I don't usually get involved in personal drama. I know, but this isn't drama, it's research. Research that could get complicated if the wrong people find out I'm helping you. Nobody's going to find out anything. You're just being friendly with a potential customer. Another pause. When do you need this done? Tomorrow night. Colby usually hits the downtown bar scene on Fridays. Fine, but you owe me more than dinner if this goes sideways. The next evening, I positioned myself at a coffee shop across the street from Colby's favorite bar and waited. At 8:30, I saw him arrive, dressed in his standard uniform of expensive casual wear and practiced confidence. 20 minutes later, Mia walked into the same bar. I couldn't see what happened inside, but I trusted Mia's ability to strike up conversations with strangers. She had the kind of personality that made people want to talk, and she was skilled at asking questions that didn't feel like interrogation. An hour later, my phone buzzed with a text from Mia. Mission accomplished. Meet me at the usual place in 30 minutes. I found Mia at the Drift, sitting at the end of the bar with a satisfied expression. Well? I asked. Your boy Colby is quite the talker when he's had a few drinks, she said, especially when he thinks he's impressing a pretty bartender with his success stories. What did you learn? First, he's definitely having money problems. He spent 10 minutes complaining about investors who don't understand his vision and clients who don't appreciate innovation. Anything specific? His biggest client canceled their contract last month. Something about missed deadlines and undelivered promises. He's scrambling to find replacement revenue. This was better than I'd hoped. What else? He's also got some interesting opinions about his personal life. Apparently, he's been seeing a married woman whose family has money and connections. He seems to think that relationship is going to solve his business problems. I felt a cold satisfaction settle in my chest. He said that? Not in those exact words, but the implication was clear. He kept talking about how his girlfriend's family could open doors for him, introduce him to the right people, maybe even invest in his company. So Colby wasn't just stealing my wife. He was planning to use her family's wealth to prop up his failing business. The Jorvens thought they were getting a successful son-in-law, but they were actually being targeted by someone who saw them as a financial opportunity. There's one more thing, Mia said. He got a phone call while we were talking. Sounded like a lawyer or an accountant. Something about documents that needed to be filed and deadlines that were approaching. He stepped outside to take the call, but he looked stressed when he came back. Legal problems on top of financial ones. Colby's situation was even worse than I'd realized. Mia, you're amazing. I know, and you owe me the best dinner this town has to offer. I drove home feeling like I gained a significant advantage. Colby wasn't the successful entrepreneur he pretended to be. He was a desperate man looking for a financial lifeline. Alma and her family were walking into a trap, and they didn't even know it. The question was, should I warn them or let them discover the truth on their own? By the time I pulled into my driveway, I'd made my decision. They'd made their choice without consulting me. Now they could live with the consequences without my help. But that didn't mean I couldn't accelerate the timeline for those consequences. The Portside Business Association's monthly breakfast meeting was held at the country club where the Jorven family maintained a membership. I'd never attended one of these meetings before my promotion. But now I was a regular fixture at the networking table, discussing commercial development projects with the kind of people who made decisions about city planning and zoning approvals. This particular morning, I arrived early and positioned myself strategically near the registration table where I'd have a clear view of everyone who entered. I was expecting Colby to show up. He rarely missed an opportunity to work the room, but I wasn't prepared for him to arrive with Elias Jorven. Alma's father was a distinguished-looking man in his early 60s with silver hair and the kind of bearing that came from a lifetime of financial security. He and Colby were deep in conversation as they approached the registration table, and I could see Elias nodding approvingly at whatever Colby was telling him. I waited until they'd gotten their name tags and coffee, then approached with a friendly smile. Good morning, Mr. Jorven. I don't think we've been formally introduced. Zane Merrinor, Richardson Construction. Elias looked momentarily startled, then recovered his composure. Of course, Zane. I've heard about your recent promotion. Congratulations. Thank you. It's been an exciting transition into commercial development. Colby had gone rigid beside Elias, clearly uncomfortable with this unexpected encounter. I ignored him completely, focusing my attention on Alma's father. Actually, Mr. Jorven, I've been meaning to reach out to your investment firm. Richardson Construction is looking for partners on some of our larger projects, and I understand Jorven Investments has experience with commercial real estate. This was true. I'd researched the Jorven family's business interests and knew they'd been involved in several development projects over the years. That's an interesting possibility, Elias said carefully. Perhaps we could schedule a meeting to discuss it. I'd appreciate that. We're breaking ground on a $60 million waterfront project next month, the kind of development that could benefit from the right financial partnership. I could see Colby's jaw tightening as I spoke. He'd probably been positioning himself as Elias's gateway to lucrative business opportunities, and here I was offering a direct relationship that would make him irrelevant. $60 million? Elias said, his interest clearly piqued. That's the mixed-use development near the harbor? That's right. Residential, commercial, and retail space. We're expecting it to be a landmark project for Portside. Colby finally found his voice. Zane, I didn't know Richardson Construction was involved in projects of that scale. We've been expanding rapidly, I said, still addressing Elias rather than Colby. Tom Richardson has been positioning the company for larger contracts, and the strategy is paying off. Impressive, Elias said. I'd definitely like to hear more about potential partnerships. I handed him my business card. I'll call your office next week to set something up. As I walked away, I could hear Colby trying to redirect the conversation, but the damage was done. Elias had just learned that his daughter's husband was involved in significantly larger business deals than his daughter's boyfriend. The breakfast meeting proceeded normally, with the usual presentations about economic development and community initiatives. I participated in the discussions, asked intelligent questions, and generally comported myself like someone who belonged in these circles. But I was really watching Colby. He spent the entire meeting trying to reestablish his credibility with the other attendees, name-dropping clients and projects that I knew from my research were either exaggerated or completely fabricated. He was working too hard, overselling his successes in a way that made him look desperate rather than confident. After the meeting, I was approached by several other business owners who wanted to discuss potential collaborations with Richardson Construction. Word was spreading about our recent contract wins, and people were beginning to see us as a major player in Portside's development future. I was in the parking lot, unlocking my company car, when Colby appeared beside me. "We need to talk," he said. "About what?" "About whatever game you're playing." I straightened up and looked at him directly. "I'm not playing any games, Colby. I'm doing my job. Your job doesn't include trying to undermine my business relationships. I wasn't aware that Elias Jorven was exclusively your business relationship." Colby stepped closer, trying to use his height advantage to intimidate me. "Stay away from the Jorven family. The Jorven family can make their own decisions about who they want to do business with. This isn't about business and you know it. Isn't it? Because from where I stand, it looks like you've been mixing business with personal relationships in ways that might not be entirely ethical." Colby's face flushed. "What's that supposed to mean?" "It means that using a romantic relationship to gain access to investment capital is a questionable business strategy." "You don't know what you're talking about." "Don't I?" "Because I've done some research on disrupt solutions, Colby. Public records are fascinating reading." I got into my car and started the engine, leaving Colby standing in the parking lot with his mouth open. The confrontation had been more direct than I'd originally planned, but it felt good to finally drop the pretense of polite professional courtesy. Colby now knew that I was aware of his financial situation and his motives for pursuing Alma. More importantly, he knew that I wasn't going to quietly disappear from the picture. That afternoon, I called Elias Jorven's office and scheduled a meeting for the following week. His secretary was efficient and professional, and she mentioned that Mr. Jorven was very interested in learning more about Richardson Construction's development projects. I spent the rest of the day preparing a presentation that would showcase our company's capabilities and financial stability. I wanted to make sure that when Elias compared his daughter's husband to his daughter's boyfriend, the comparison would be as stark as possible. That evening, Alma was waiting for me when I got home. "We need to talk," she said, echoing Colby's words from the parking lot. "About what?" "About your behavior at the business meeting this morning." I poured myself a glass of water and leaned against the kitchen counter. "What about it?" "Colby said you were inappropriate, that you tried to interfere with his conversation with my father." "I introduced myself to your father and mentioned that my company might be interested in doing business with his firm. That's called networking, Alma." "That's not what Colby said happened." "Colby wasn't part of the conversation I had with your father, so I'm not sure how he would know what was said." Alma's expression tightened. "He said you were trying to make him look bad." "I didn't need to try. Colby's perfectly capable of making himself look bad without any help from me." "What's that supposed to mean?" I studied my wife's face, wondering how much she actually knew about her boyfriend's situation. "It means that maybe you should ask Colby some questions about his business before you make any major life decisions." "My life decisions are none of your concern anymore." "Fair enough. But your father's investment decisions might become his concern if he doesn't do proper due diligence." Alma stared at me for a long moment, clearly trying to decide whether to ask what I meant by that comment. Finally, she turned and walked away without another word. I finished my water and went to my workshop, feeling like I'd successfully planted several seeds of doubt. Alma would probably call Colby and repeat our conversation, which would make him even more paranoid about my activities. Elias would spend the week thinking about potential business partnerships with Richardson Construction, which would give him a reason to take a closer look at my professional credentials. And somewhere in the back of everyone's mind, questions would be forming about Colby's true financial situation. I was beginning to enjoy this game. My meeting with Elias Jorvens took place in his downtown office, a suite of rooms that managed to convey both traditional wealth and modern sophistication. The walls were lined with photographs of successful development projects, and the conference table was surrounded by leather chairs that probably cost more than most people's monthly salary. Elias arrived precisely on time, accompanied by his business partner and a young associate who took notes throughout our conversation. I'd prepared extensively for this meeting, bringing detailed information about Richardson Construction's current projects, financial statements, and future development plans. "This is impressive work, Zane," Elias said, reviewing the waterfront development plans. "I wasn't aware that Richardson Construction was operating at this scale." "We've been growing steadily over the past few years," I replied. "Tom Richardson has been very strategic about taking on larger contracts and building relationships with major clients." "And your role in this growth?" "I've been managing the technical side of our biggest projects for the past 8 years. The promotion to Director of Commercial Development was a natural progression." We spent an hour discussing potential partnerships, investment structures, and timeline considerations. Elias asked intelligent questions about construction logistics, permitting processes, and risk management. It was clear that he understood the development business and was genuinely interested in working with Richardson Construction. "I'd like to propose a preliminary partnership on the waterfront project," he said finally. "Nothing formal yet, but perhaps we could explore how Jorvens Investments might participate in the financing. I think Tom would be very interested in that conversation." "Excellent. I'll have my associate draft some initial terms for review." As we shook hands, Elias seemed to hesitate for a moment. "Zane, I hope you don't mind me asking, but how are things at home? I know this has been a difficult time for everyone involved." I met his eyes directly. "I'm focused on moving forward, Mr. Jorvens, professionally and personally." "That's admirable, and probably wise." I left the meeting feeling like I'd accomplished something significant. Not only had I established a potential business relationship with Alma's father, but I'd also demonstrated that I was capable of functioning at a higher level than anyone in the Jorven family had previously recognized. More importantly, I'd given Elias a reason to compare my professional stability with Colby's questionable business practices. That afternoon, I received a call from Tom Richardson. "Zane, I just got off the phone with Elias Jorven. He's interested in partnering with us on the waterfront project." "That's great news." "It's more than great news, it's a game changer. Jorven Investments has the kind of capital and connections that could help us compete for even larger contracts." We discussed the implications of the potential partnership, including the possibility of expanding Richardson Construction's commercial development division and taking on projects in other cities. "I have to ask," Tom said, "how did you manage to get a meeting with Elias Jorven? He's not exactly known for being accessible to contractors." "We met at a business association meeting. I mentioned our current projects and he expressed interest." "Well, whatever you said, it worked. He spoke very highly of your professionalism and knowledge of the development business." After ending the call with Tom, I allowed myself a moment of satisfaction. 6 months ago, the Jorven family had viewed me as an obstacle to Alma's happiness. Now, her father was actively pursuing a business relationship with me. That evening, I decided to test how the news of my meeting with Elias would be received at home. "I had an interesting meeting today," I told Alma over dinner. "Oh?" "With your father, about a potential business partnership." Alma's fork paused halfway to her mouth. "You met with my father. He's interested in having Jorven Investments participate in the waterfront development project." "That's unexpected." "Is it? Richardson Construction is the general contractor on a $60 million project. It makes sense that he'd want to explore investment opportunities." Alma was quiet for the rest of the meal, clearly processing this information. I could see her trying to reconcile the image of me as her inadequate husband with the reality of me as someone her father considered a viable business partner. The next morning, I received a text message from an unknown number. "We should meet. There are things you need to know about Colby." I stared at the message for several minutes, trying to decide whether to respond. It could be a trap, an attempt to lure me into some kind of confrontation, but it could also be exactly what it appeared to be: someone with information about Colby's situation. I texted back, "Who is this?" The response came quickly. "Someone who used to work for Disrupt Solutions. Meet me at the coffee shop on Harbor Street at 2 p.m. I spent the morning debating whether to keep the appointment. My instincts told me it was risky, but my curiosity was stronger than my caution. At 2 o'clock, I walked into the coffee shop and looked around for anyone who might be waiting for me. A young woman sitting alone at a corner table caught my eye and nodded slightly. I approached her table. "Are you the person who texted me?" "Sarah Mitchell," she said, extending her hand. "I was Colby's assistant until last month." I sat down across from her, studying her face. She was probably in her late 20s, professionally dressed, with the kind of nervous energy that suggested she had something important to say. "Why did you want to meet?" I asked. "Because I know what Colby's really like, and I think you deserve to know the truth." "What truth?" Sarah glanced around the coffee shop, then leaned forward and lowered her voice. "Colby's company is in serious trouble. They're not just behind on rent, they're facing multiple lawsuits from clients who paid for services that were never delivered." "How serious?" "Serious enough that he's been looking for investors who don't ask too many questions about the company's financial records." This confirmed what I'd already suspected, but hearing it from someone with inside knowledge made it more concrete. "There's something else," Sarah continued. "Colby's been bragging about his relationship with a wealthy family who might invest in his company. He specifically mentioned that his girlfriend's father runs an investment firm." I felt a cold anger building in my chest. "He's using Alma to get to her father's money." "That's exactly what he's doing. And he's not particularly discreet about it. He told several people that marrying into the Jorven family would solve all his business problems." "Why are you telling me this?" Sarah's expression hardened. Because Colby is a manipulative, dishonest person who destroys everything he touches. I quit my job because I couldn't stand watching him lie to clients and investors anymore. Do you have any documentation of these business problems? Some, but I signed a non-disclosure agreement when I left the company. I can't give you specific documents without risking a lawsuit. But you can confirm that everything I might find in public records is accurate? Everything and more. We talked for another 20 minutes, with Sarah providing details about Disrupt Solutions' failed projects, unpaid bills, and increasingly desperate attempts to find new funding. By the time she left, I had a complete picture of Colby's situation. He wasn't just broke, he was facing potential criminal charges for fraud, and he was planning to use my wife and her family to escape the consequences of his failures. I drove home that afternoon with a decision crystallizing in my mind. I'd been playing a careful game, applying pressure gradually and waiting for the truth to emerge naturally. But Sarah's information had changed the stakes. This wasn't just about my marriage anymore. It was about protecting the Jorven family from a predator who was planning to rob them. The question was, how could I expose Colby without revealing how I'd obtained the information? The answer came to me as I pulled into my driveway. I didn't need to expose Colby directly. I just needed to create circumstances where he would expose himself. The plan I developed over the next 3 days was elegant in its simplicity. Instead of trying to convince anyone that Colby was a fraud, I would create a situation where his desperation would force him to reveal his true nature. The key was timing and pressure. I started by calling Tom Richardson and proposing an expansion of our potential partnership with Jorven Investments. What if we invited Elias to tour our current job sites? I suggested. Show him the scale and quality of our work firsthand. That's a great idea, Tom agreed. When were you thinking? This weekend. We could make it a comprehensive presentation. Current projects, future plans, financial projections. Really demonstrate why Richardson Construction is a solid investment opportunity. I'll call Elias today and see if he's available. The tour was scheduled for Saturday morning, which gave me time to set up the second part of my plan. I called Mia and asked for another favor. I need you to spread some information through the local business community, I told her. What kind of information? The kind that suggests Richardson Construction is about to announce a major new partnership with significant financial backing. Is that true? It might be. But I need the rumor to circulate before it becomes official. Zane, you're playing with fire here. If this backfires, it could hurt your company's reputation. It won't backfire. Trust me. Mia agreed to help, and by Thursday evening, the rumor was circulating through Portside's business community that Richardson Construction was about to announce a major expansion funded by a prominent local investment firm. On Friday, I received exactly the phone call I'd been expecting. Zane, it's Colby. I was wondering if we could meet and discuss some potential business opportunities. What kind of opportunities? I think Disrupt Solutions and Richardson Construction could find some mutually beneficial partnerships. Maybe we could grab coffee and talk about it. I'm pretty busy this week, Colby. What specifically did you have in mind? There was a pause, and I could hear the desperation creeping into his voice. Well, I've heard that your company is expanding, and I thought there might be opportunities for technology integration in your development projects. Technology integration? Smart building systems, automated project management, innovative client interfaces. The kind of cutting-edge solutions that could give Richardson Construction a competitive advantage. It was exactly the kind of vague, buzzword-heavy pitch that Colby specialized in. More importantly, it was clearly motivated by his need to find new revenue sources rather than any genuine business opportunity. That's interesting, I said, but I'd need to see some concrete examples of successful implementations before I could consider any partnerships. Of course, I could prepare a comprehensive presentation. Maybe we could meet early next week. Maybe. I'll check my schedule and get back to you. I hung up without committing to anything, knowing that the uncertainty would make Colby even more anxious. Saturday morning arrived gray and drizzly, typical weather for Portside in late fall. Elias Jorven arrived at our main job site precisely on time, accompanied by his business partner and the same associate who'd attended our previous meeting. Tom Richardson and I spent 2 hours showing them through our current projects, explaining our construction processes, and discussing our expansion plans. Elias asked detailed questions about everything from material sourcing to labor management, clearly impressed by the scale and professionalism of our operations. "This is exactly the kind of operation we like to partner with," he told Tom as we concluded the tour. "Solid fundamentals, experienced management, realistic growth projections." "We're excited about the possibility of working together," Tom replied. "Zane's done an excellent job of positioning us for this kind of partnership." As we walked back to the parking area, Elias fell into step beside me. "I have to say, Zane, this has been eye-opening. I'm beginning to understand why you've been so successful in your career." "Thank you, Mr. Jorven. I appreciate the opportunity to show you what we're capable of. I hope you don't mind me asking, but have you given any thought to what you want to do after your personal situation is resolved?" "I'm focused on building my career and moving forward. This partnership with Jorven Investments could be exactly the opportunity I've been looking for." Elias nodded approvingly. "I think we're going to work well together." After he left, Tom and I debriefed about the meeting. "I think we've got a deal," Tom said. "Elias seemed genuinely impressed with what we showed him today." "It certainly went well." "There's something I'm curious about, though. How do you know Elias Jorven personally?" "I'd been expecting this question. He's my father-in-law, or will be my former father-in-law, once the divorce is finalized." Tom's eyebrows rose. "That's not going to create any awkward situations?" "I don't think so. We're both professionals, and this partnership makes sense regardless of personal relationships." "Fair enough. Just wanted to make sure there weren't any complications I should know about." That afternoon, I received another call from Colby. "Zane, I heard about your meeting with Elias Jorven today. Sounds like Richardson Construction is really moving up in the world." "Word travels fast." "Small town. Listen, I was thinking about our conversation yesterday, and I'd really like to set up that meeting as soon as possible. I think I could bring some significant value to your expansion plans." "What kind of value?" "Well, I've got some connections with potential investors who might be interested in participating in your growth. People with serious capital who are looking for solid opportunities." This was getting interesting. Colby was now claiming to have investor connections, which meant he was either lying outright or planning to use his relationship with Alma to gain access to additional Jorven family money. "That's intriguing," I said. "Who are these investors?" "I'd prefer to discuss the details in person. Are you available Monday morning?" "I might be, but I'd need to know more about these investors before I could commit to a meeting." "Of course. Let me just say that they're local people with significant resources and a strong interest in supporting Portside's economic development." Local people with significant resources. That could only mean the Jorven family. "All right, Colby. Let's meet Monday at 10. My office." "Perfect. I think you're going to be very impressed with what I have to offer." After ending the call, I sat back in my chair and smiled. Colby had just walked into the trap I'd been setting for weeks. On Monday morning, he would arrive at my office expecting to pitch a business partnership that would solve his financial problems. What he didn't know was that I'd already established a direct relationship with his supposed investors, and I had detailed knowledge of his company's actual situation. More importantly, I'd arranged for that meeting to be witnessed by people whose opinions mattered. I spent Sunday evening preparing for what I expected to be the final confrontation in this elaborate game I'd been playing. By the time Colby walked into my office on Monday morning, I was ready to end this once and for all. Monday morning arrived with crisp autumn air and clear skies, the kind of weather that made Portside look like a postcard. I arrived at the office early and spent an hour reviewing my notes and preparing for what I expected to be a decisive conversation. At exactly 10 o'clock, Colby Varron walked into my office wearing his most expensive suit and his most confident smile. He carried a leather portfolio that probably contained the same generic presentation materials he'd been recycling for months. "Zane, good to see you," he said, extending his hand with practiced enthusiasm. "Colby, please have a seat." He settled into the chair across from my desk and opened his portfolio. "I think you're going to be excited about what I have to propose today." "I'm listening." "As I mentioned on the phone, I've been working with some local investors who are very interested in Richardson Construction's expansion plans. People with serious capital and strong connections in the business community. And these investors are, well, I'd prefer to let them introduce themselves, but I can tell you that they're established members of Portside's financial community with a track record of successful investments." I leaned back in my chair and studied Colby's face. He was trying to project confidence, but I could see the desperation underneath the performance. "That's interesting, Colby, because I've already been meeting with local investors about our expansion plans." His smile flickered slightly. "Oh? Anyone I might know?" "Elias Jorven. Jorven Investments is considering a significant partnership with Richardson Construction." The color drained from Colby's face. "Elias Jorven?" "That's right. We've had several meetings, and he toured our job sites on Saturday, very impressed with our operations." Colby was quiet for a long moment, clearly trying to process this information and figure out how it affected his own plans. That's great," he said finally. "Actually, Elias is one of the investors I was referring to. I've been working with him on this opportunity." "Have you? That's funny, because he's never mentioned you in any of our conversations about the partnership." Another pause. "Well, I've been working behind the scenes, helping to facilitate the connection." "I see. And what exactly is your role in this facilitation?" Colby was starting to sweat now, realizing that his carefully constructed story was falling apart. "I've been advising Elias on technology investments, helping him understand the opportunities in the construction industry." "Technology investments like Disrupt Solutions?" "Among others, yes." I opened my laptop and turned the screen toward Colby, showing him the business filings I'd researched weeks earlier. "Colby, I've done some research on Disrupt Solutions. According to these public records, your company is 3 months behind on rent, facing multiple client lawsuits, and you've been denied for several personal loans in the past 6 months. His face went completely white. "Those records there are explanations for. There are also some interesting court documents here about fraud investigations and unpaid contractor bills. Not exactly the kind of track record that would impress potential investors." Colby stood up abruptly. "I don't have to listen to this." "Actually, you do, because I know exactly what you've been doing, Colby." "What are you talking about?" "I'm talking about your plan to use your relationship with Alma to gain access to her family's money. I know about your financial problems, your failed businesses, and your history of targeting wealthy women to fund your lifestyle." You can't prove any of that." "I don't need to prove anything. The public records speak for themselves." I stood up and walked around my desk, positioning myself between Colby and the door. "Here's what's going to happen," I said quietly. "You're going to end your relationship with my wife. You're going to stop pursuing business relationships with the Jorven family. And you're going to leave Portside. You can't make me do anything." "Can't I? Because I think Elias Jorven would be very interested to learn about your company's legal problems and your history of targeting investors who don't do proper due diligence." Colby's jaw tightened. "Alma won't believe you. She loves me. Does she? Or does she love the idea of what you represent? Because once she learns the truth about your financial situation, I think she'll realize that she's not upgrading to a better man. She's downgrading to a desperate fraud." You don't know what you're talking about. I know exactly what I'm talking about, and so does everyone else who matters. I walked back to my desk and picked up my phone. Would you like me to call Elias right now and discuss your business proposal? I'm sure he'd be fascinated to hear about your technology investments and your plans for facilitating our partnership. Colby stared at me for a long moment, his face cycling through anger, fear, and finally resignation. What do you want? He asked quietly. I want you gone. Out of Alma's life, out of her family's business, and out of my town. And if I refuse? Then I make some phone calls. Elias learns about your real situation. The other members of the business association learn about your fraud investigations. Your remaining clients learn about your unpaid bills and legal problems. I paused, letting the implications sink in. How long do you think Disrupt Solutions would survive that kind of scrutiny? Colby was quiet for several minutes, staring at the floor and probably calculating his options. Fine, he said finally. I'll end things with Alma. Today, and you'll stop pursuing business relationships with her family. Yes. And you'll leave Portside within 30 days. He nodded reluctantly. Good. I'm glad we could reach an understanding. Colby picked up his portfolio and walked toward the door, then turned back to face me. You know this won't fix your marriage, right? Even if I'm gone, Alma still doesn't want to be with you. You're probably right, I said. But at least she'll be making that decision based on the truth, instead of your lies. After Colby left, I sat in my office for a long time, thinking about what had just happened. I'd won, in a sense. I'd exposed Colby's deception and protected the Jorven family from his schemes. But I'd also probably lost my marriage permanently. That evening, I received a phone call from Alma. Colby told me about your conversation today, she said without preamble. Did he? He said you threatened him, tried to blackmail him into leaving town. I presented him with some facts about his business situation and suggested that those facts might be of interest to your family. You had no right to interfere in my relationship. You're right. I didn't have that right. But I had an obligation to protect your father from a potential fraud. Alma was quiet for a moment. Colby explained about his business problems. He said they're temporary setbacks, that every entrepreneur faces challenges. Did he explain about the fraud investigations, the unpaid contractors, the history of failed businesses? Another pause. He said you were exaggerating those problems to make him look bad. Alma, everything I told Colby came from public records. Court filings, business licenses, loan applications. You can verify all of it yourself. I don't need to verify anything. I know Colby, and I know he's a good man who's been working hard to build his business. Do you? Because the evidence suggests that he's been planning to use your relationship to gain access to your family's money. That's ridiculous. Is it? Ask yourself why he was so interested in meeting with your father about business opportunities. Ask yourself why he's been pushing for a more serious commitment to your relationship. I don't have to listen to this. No, you don't, but you might want to ask Colby some direct questions about his financial situation before you make any major life decisions. Alma hung up without responding. 2 days later, I received a text message from an unknown number. Thank you. I stared at the message for a moment, then realized it was probably from Sarah Mitchell, Colby's former assistant. Word had apparently spread through the business community that Colby was leaving town. A week later, Tom Richardson called me into his office. I just got off the phone with Elias Jorven, he said. The partnership is official. Jorven Investments is providing the financing for our expansion into commercial development. That's excellent news. It's more than excellent, it's transformative. This partnership is going to allow us to compete for projects we never could have handled before. We spent an hour discussing the implications of the partnership and my expanded role in the company's growth plans. There's one thing I'm curious about, Tom said as our meeting concluded. Elias mentioned that you'd helped him avoid a potentially problematic business relationship. Something about a technology company that wasn't what it appeared to be. I just shared some publicly available information about a company that was seeking investment from Jorvens Investments. Well, whatever you did, Elias was impressed. He said it demonstrated exactly the kind of integrity and attention to detail that he wants in a business partner. That evening, I drove to the Drift and found Mia behind the bar. "I heard Colby Varron left town," she said as she poured my bourbon. "Did he?" "Packed up his apartment and disappeared over the weekend. Left his Tesla at the dealership. Apparently, he couldn't make the payments." I sipped my drink and watched the local news on the television above the bar. "Mia, can I ask you something?" "Sure. Do you think I did the right thing?" She considered the question for a moment. "You protected people from a predator who was planning to rob them. How is that not the right thing? But I also destroyed my marriage in the process." "Zane, your marriage was already over. Alma made that decision months ago. All you did was make sure she didn't get robbed while she was leaving you." I finished my bourbon and left a 20 on the bar. "Besides," Mia called as I headed for the door, "from what I hear, you're doing pretty well for yourself these days. Successful career, respected in the community, bright future ahead of you." She was right. I had built something real and lasting while Colby had been building illusions. I had earned my success through competence and integrity, while he had tried to steal his through deception and manipulation. Alma had left me for what she thought was a better man, but she'd actually chosen a fraud who was planning to use her family's wealth to cover his failures. Now she would have to live with that choice, and I would continue building the life I'd started creating the night I found her burner phone. As I drove home through the empty streets of Portside, I realized that I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't hurt or disappointed or desperate to win Alma back. I was free to build the career I'd always been capable of. Free to form relationships with people who valued honesty over appearances. Free to create a future based on my own choices rather than someone else's expectations. The upgrade Alma had been seeking was never about finding a better man. It was about finding a man who could give her a different kind of life. But the real upgrade had been mine. I'd upgraded from being someone who accepted other people's judgments about my worth to being someone who knew my own value, and that upgrade was permanent.